just a normal high school life. I went to a boys' high school. I joined when I was 17, and it was the right thing to do because we're at a war, and they needed personnel. And I had two brothers, both in the service, and one in the Marines and one in the Army, and so it was a no-brainer. I just decided I should be part of that. The Marine Corps had a very tough training, and a lot of it physical, out in the boondocks and going over fences and rough terrain, and then being able to pitch a tent and sleep at night when it's pouring rain, and nothing went real easy. It's just it was a good experience, and I think that's what helped make a lot of the guys stronger in their commitment to become a service, Marine or Army or whatever. At that stage, it was the whole feeling was survival. It was tough, and so you wanted to survive that day's training, so that you'd be ready for the next day. And it wasn't like they laid out an itinerary and you're going to do this and do that. And it was a lot of it was impromptu. You might be sleeping, and all of a sudden at 2 a.m, the officers are shaking you. You got to get dressed and report, and they have you out on a 2-mile march, and you wondered why. There was no reason for it. It was just that the officers thought that was good for our training. So it's the training was probably the toughest thing for particularly in the Marines. Well, I was assigned a ship called the General S.D. Sturgis, and the Sturgis was used quite a bit for transporting troops to and from different areas, and mostly from the mainland to one of the islands in the Pacific. And there are several different islands that the troops were used to reinforce protection in case there was an all-out war, that type of war, where the enemy would be coming at us. So it's just we, as recruits and stuff, we just had to do whatever the commanding officer had in mind for us to do. Keep your weapons clean and ready to use, but most of all, whatever detail your particular unit had, maybe a cleanup type of detail, maybe building something or reinforcing some area of the neighborhood to protect. And it was just impromptu type of commitment. You didn't really know each day what you were going to be doing. The officers wake you up at 5 a.m, and they had a report, and then you were put on whatever detail they had assigned for you. Oh no, our ship was never attacked. I mean, there were mostly two-man subs, and once they were out at sea, they had no protection. I mean, they were easy to spot by plane, and of course the bombs they had for a while they didn't have it, but then they finally had bombs that would drop on the top of the water and explode. And of course, these subs weren't built with great protection, and they were really almost like suicide subs. The crew, they knew the chances of their survival was nil or none. I was in service for probably 2.5 years, and I think probably 2 years, mostly at sea. And I say at sea, well, we'd pull into a dock, and that we'd get a little relief to get on land, but most of the time we're at sea all the time. And my brother was in the Army, U.S. Army, and he was on an island in the Pacific, and we got close to that island, and we had a good captain that was a good military man, and he heard that I had a relative, and so he called me in and said, well, who was the relative? And I said, it was my brother. And he said, well, by all means, we got to maybe we can get a little reunion. And I said, oh, that'd be wonderful. And so that's what happened. He arranged to get the ship closer to the island. And then the various branches of service, they took over, and they got Frank. My brother's name was Frank, and they got him to a certain site on one of the islands, and we got close to the island, and the captain actually made arrangements to one of our launches to take me to the island, and we had a nice reunion, probably for a couple of 3 hours, and that was it. That was the only time I saw him until we both got out of the service. Our forces were getting stronger in the Pacific in that area, and that the Japanese, they couldn't do anything because we had control of the sea around the various islands, so that they couldn't. They had a hard time surviving with getting food, and so that it was just a matter of time. They would surrender, but the Japanese weren't easy to accept surrender. To them, that was a holy thing to do, and they had a commitment that they would rather die by the sword than surrender. The captain would report to the crew and just say that the Japanese are at a loss, or we did this kind of damage maybe to one of their aircraft carriers, and so that it sort of came as a surprise that when it finally was over, we knew it was near, but when it was officially noticed, reported that the Japanese came as a delegation before the American forces to surrender. That was a joyous time. Most everybody had, the Navy and stuff, they had families and their service, and that was the big thing, that they were full of joy that they're going to see their wives or their mothers and relatives, and it was a joyous time, even though you're out in nowhere on a small ship, a submarine, or a destroyer. That was there were celebrations. I mean, the celebrations were naturally small because the destroyers were small, and everything was but it was a joyous time, and I mean, I feel you were very happy, and of course, all the guys, particularly all the married men, knew they were going to be with their wives and their family again. And it was a joyous time. Everybody knew what was going to be happening because we knew that there was a signing, but we didn't realize we had high Japanese officials that under our care and that were there to sign the papers of surrender, and uh, and of course the Navy, American services, they had all the ships that were out in the Pacific uh, um, at what we called half mast. It was a time that they uh, spent the day thinking about the surrender and what it took, and whatever they could do to help with the surrender. I wasn't on the Missouri, but we were within range, and in fact, I we had binoculars, and we kept the binoculars on on the Missouri to see what the officers, the Japanese being brought up on launches and climbing up the ladder uh, to sit at the desk, and so that part, it was just it wasn't to me. It wasn't important to actually see all of it, knowing that it was happening. As long as that was the whole purpose of being out there and what was happening, was the surrender. And once they started the Japanese being launched on launches to take them to the battleship Missouri, that that was the feeling of everybody there. It was joy time. I mean, they didn't have champagne or anything to celebrate, but they did celebrate. I had a couple of real good friends. One of them actually uh, was a priest. He was uh, he joined the services, and he was from uh, uh, Illinois, somewhere in Illinois, Father Lesniak, and he was a good priest, and but he enlisted to. Well, once he enlisted, he asked to get out in the field among the troops, and he did. There were times when he was in harm's way, but he survived, and he was a good priest and a good man, and we had a good relationship, a good friend. I had another brother that was a Marine, and he was killed in action, and so the island of Saipan, when they started to regain all the islands, and Saipan was the toughest island they had because the Japanese fortified themselves with had families and so on the island, and they also had quite a military base there, and but he was on the island, and there was heavy fighting, and unfortunately he was killed. I was able to get home because my brother was killed in the Marines, and the military felt the hardship of families for losing somebody that they would. We had other friends that their son was killed, and the other sons in the service were immediately discharged so that they could get home with their families. I got a scholarship. I was, uh, I did pretty well in high school, and I started in college, and then when the war broke out, I was out. So I was able to go back, and so I was able to play football again, and I got a scholarship, and then I just everything was good to get home and with the family uh, and everybody, the neighbors, and the whole were a bunch of Finnish, and well, get back to normal. I decided I started coaching, and then there's other opportunities come up, but I was pretty much committed to coaching football, and it was a good life, and among the youth, and good schools, and it was good for me. I started out with a small school, and then I got transferred, and I got an opening at Notre Dame, and I wasn't the head coach; I was just on the staff, and that was very good.
Some of the things he left out, it took him about 6 or 8 months to get home because the troop transport had to bring all the men home. And then he did his senior year of high school. But from Notre Dame, he was drafted to the Chicago Cardinals. They were Chicago. But while he was drafted, he kept getting a phone call from the government. And he went to Washington, and he went to the CIA for about 3.5 years. And then Terry Brennan was one of his teammates, and he ran into Terry Brennan, and Terry said, "Jack, I could use you. Come and coach with me at Notre Dame." So then he went. That's when he was single. He said, "That's it. I want to coach." So he coached at Notre Dame with Terry Brennan, and then he went and he coached at Nebraska for a year. He left that out. That CAA 3.5 years was very crucial and very important. He was overseas, and he'll let him tell you about it.
Yeah, before the Korean War, and so it's a lot of behind the scenes work of meeting the right people and trying to influence them to be accept your report and the information that you had. We had a select crew that would swim at night and to these various ships, and maybe plant some explosives around their propeller, so that once the propeller is damaged, the ship is useless for many days to get repaired, go into dry dock. So that that was one of the goals of the crew of the swimming team. And they accepted the program. And so we got maybe 3 or 4 guys that were good swimmers. But it wasn't when you were a swimmer like in competition. But with swimming there, you're swimming at night, you're swimming in shark-infested waters, and you got to be careful what you do. I think war changes everybody, and sometimes it's for the better, and sometimes it's not so good. I'm fortunate. I was raised by good parents and good family, and went to good schools, and so I was in good shape. when the war ended, uh, I had a career opportunity in coaching, and so that was good for me. And of course, there were a lot of guys that were being discharged at similar situations, maybe not in coaching, but businesses and things like that. But they weren't able to do while they were in service. But the service, I think, wakes you up a lot of it, and particularly when you're the type of service that you're in and what you're doing. I think you settle down and realize that how important life is, family, and all the things that happen in life. This is the greatest country in the world, and everything. I mean, it's the greatest place to raise a family, and the opportunities are what you make of them. You know, you can make excuses, but that's not going to bring money in your pocket. You just have. There's so many opportunities that it's hard to really. I think for some people to sit down and say, yes, I'll do that, I'll do this. You really have to you trust in your own faith and your own beliefs, and take what opportunities you have, and some you'll accept and some you don't. As a student, be a good student. You know, do what you have to do, and do it willingly, and with the commitment to be the best report you ever did, and constantly, you know, the opportunities they come and they go, and you've got to be careful of what you do, and you want to. You may have somebody older in the family, or a good friend, or in the church that can give you a little advice and help along the way. There's so many opportunities out there, and it's just a question of picking one and going for it.